Hi guys, I just thought I'll post another video, not because I've got nothing else to do, but because I think there's a certain way that we as a church need to think, and so here goes. Guys, if you read Genesis 1 to 12, um, it's basically history on repeat, and throughout the last many thousand years, you'll find that what happened in Genesis 1 to 12 just keeps being recycled by the enemy, and God's solution has been consistent too. And let's take Genesis 3 for instance, where man sinned, Adam sinned, and it brought in decay and it brought in death, and it was irreversible. We're talking about events that were cataclysmic, that changed the nature of the earth. And I would suggest to you that what's happening right now can have the same outcome, where it leaves the earth changed forever. Um, like I've said in previous videos, World War One had an effect on the earth. World War Two had an effect on the earth. 9/11 had an effect on the earth. The tsunami had an effect on the earth. But never was the earth brought to a complete standstill. And so this event has the potential to paralyze the globe. And so when you look at Genesis 3, you realize that death and decay came in and the world was never the same. You go to Genesis 6, and I think it's in chapter 6, verse 4, where it says that in those days there were Nephilim on the earth because demonic angels had left their proper boundary and had cohabited with the women of the earth, to the point where it literally contaminated the gene pool of mankind. And the flood was but a natural outcome, because God cleansed the earth and gave Noah a chance to start again. And then that was an irreversible event that happened. Then you go on to Genesis 11, and you see Nimrod, who was known as a hunter of souls, and he unites mankind to take a defiant stand against God, and builds the Tower of Babel. And that is another irreversible incident where the earth was split into different languages and nations. And so you see a pattern there. You see decay and death in the first instance. You see demonic interference in the second instance. And in the third instance, you see defiance. And then in Genesis 12, you see God entering the scene, calling out a man called Abraham from the Ur of Chaldees, and saying to him that, listen, leave your clan, leave your family, leave your country, come follow me. And out of that one man, he says, I will bless the nations through you. And so in Genesis 12, God provides a deliverer. And through history, whether you look at the Old Testament or the New Testament or the history of the earth, you'll find that God has always provided a deliverer, either in the form of Abraham or a David or a Noah or a Moses or a Joshua, and eventually Jesus Christ. And now he provides the earth deliverance through a people called the church. And so we have a critical role to play at this time. And so when you look at what's happening around you, the same factors are in play. There is death and decay. There is really evil demonic spirits behind what is happening. And once COVID is over, there will be the re-emergence of a certain defiance against God, where man will once again turn to human institutions or to organizations or to a new vaccine or a new solution that they think will keep them safe from the next virus. After World War One, it was the League of Nations. After World War Two, it was the United Nations. After 9/11, they rebuilt a tower that was taller than the Twin Towers that fell, as a defiant stand, saying, We may be broken, but we build again. But it's never a turning to the builder, Christ. And so there is this critical role that I believe Acts 29 has to play at a time such as this. And so I want us to follow Abraham's pattern, because in Abraham, God sends a deliverer to the nations, not just then, but into the future. So much so that he says, your descendants shall fill the earth, and I will bless the nations through you. And we happen to be those descendants, children of Abraham by faith, according to Galatians 3, I think. And so here's what Abraham did. He followed God, and then he built an altar. In Hebrews, in Genesis 12:8 it says, in Hebrews 11:8 it says he followed God not knowing where he was going. In Genesis 12:8 it says, and he built an altar, and for the first time in the history of man, a mere human being called on the name of God. But guess what Abraham called him? He called him Yahweh. It's the first revelation of God letting someone in on his personal name, where it says Abraham built an altar and called on the name of Yahweh, the self-existent one. And so I encourage us as a church to do two things. Okay, one, build an altar and begin to call on the name of Yahweh. What do you mean build an altar? Build an altar of worship, build an altar of prayer, build an altar of declarations over the next many weeks, every morning, and call on the name of Yahweh to begin to heal your city first, because we are supposed to seek the welfare of Vancouver. Heal your city first, then call out for BC. Then begin to call out for Ontario and Quebec, nations that have been, provinces that are being ravaged by this virus. And then call out for this entire nation. Let Canada be on the forefront of God's deliverance because of churches that begin to call out to God. So that's one side of it, where you build an altar and call out on the name of Yahweh, so that like Abraham was, so we now become a blessing to this nation. And then from there on, go to other nations, to Spain, to Italy, to India, to UK. Call out for those nations too, from Jerusalem to Judea to Samaria and to the ends of the earth. So that's one aspect of it. The second aspect of it is I want you to take Isaiah 27 verse 1, and to the best of your ability and to the best of the present knowledge that you have, and don't step into presumption, but take Isaiah 27:1, where it says that God has unsheathed his mighty merciless sword and has used it to cut Leviathan down, the fleeing serpent, the coiling serpent. So basically rebuke the powers that are behind the ravage that is happening across the earth, and use the word of God. Find the word of God, different scriptures that you can begin to speak, saying, I end this ravage in this city. I end this ravage in this province. I end the ravage in Ontario and in Quebec. And begin to use Isaiah 27:1, the word of God that proceeds from the mouth of God, may it be spoken by you. So on one hand, we are dismantling things. On the other hand, we are blessing the nations. Acts 29, we've learned enough. It's now time to put it into practice. Yeah. Remember, we talked about how a prevailing church is a church that contends in battle, so that the gates of hell may not prevail. Yeah. So I'm calling you to this, and we'll talk more about this on Sunday. And I just know that at a time such as this, we as a church have been called to recognize Jesus Christ as the rider on the white horse in Revelations 19:11 to 15, and that we need to engage him as majestic King of kings and Lord of lords. Read Revelations 19:11 to 15 and you'll get an idea. Engage that personage of God in worship, in prayer, and that is where we will speak from. Yeah? Bless you guys. Such a pleasure being part of this body. Yeah? See you guys. Bye.